U.S. senators held confirmation hearings today for some of Donald Trump's picks for his cabinet. And up today was the man who will play a key role in carrying out Trump's economic agenda. The CBC's Katie Simpson was watching this hearing, and she joins me now from Washington. Okay, Katie, what do we learn about the tariff agenda? Because that is the number one focus of everybody, it seems. What did we learn?
Are you saying that Canada's interested in learning more about Donald Trump's tariff agenda?
Just a little.
Just a little bit. So today, Scott Bessent was before senators answering questions at his confirmation hearing. He wants to be the Treasury Secretary. Donald Trump has selected him to be the nominee. And we got sort of a broad overview of what that agenda is going to look like, that economic agenda, defending Donald Trump's plan to introduce major tax cuts and to sort of pay for the promises that Donald Trump made during the 2024 election campaign. I forgot what year it was there. Oh, my goodness. That's where we are today.
It's been a month, Katie. It's been a month.
It's been a month. It's been a month. And so we got a little bit more insight into how Bessent does view tariffs. He's a hedge fund billionaire. He's actually a protege of George Soros, who is a Democratic mega donor. However, he is aligned with Donald Trump, and he is a true believer in the tariff agenda. And he was asked by senators, a number of different senators, about, how the administration, the incoming administration, should he be confirmed, how they would use them. And have a listen. A lot of it is focused on China. Some of it is focused on Mexico. But here's how he explains that the incoming Trump administration sort of views tariffs as a tool.
One will be for remedying unfair trade practices, either by industry or country, the Chinese tariffs. Two, maybe for a more generalized tariff as a revenue raiser for the federal budget. And three, President Trump, I think, has added a third use of tariffs, as you said, as a skilled negotiator, so that tariffs can be used for negotiations, whether it's for Mexico on the fentanyl crisis.
So he talked there about China and he talked there about Mexico, no mention of Canada. One other thing he did talk about is that he's open to the idea of tariffs on carbon emissions, specifically speaking about products produced in China that have a larger carbon footprint. That's something that he thinks could get support from Democrats and Republicans. But he was asked by one senator specifically about Canada. It was a senator from Vermont, Senator Welch. And the thing is, these kinds of events are kind of shows, and the senators have a limited amount of time. And as he pressed the answer for an answer on, we rely on a trading relationship with Canada, we're afraid this is going to hurt us. Because time was running out and Bessent didn't really get into it, didn't directly address it, the senator moved on to another pressing question. Right. So we didn't get any sort of clarity specifically related to Canada, other than this guy is very enthusiastic about tariffs.
Okay, well, that's great because no one's waiting for clarity on this big issue, certainly not in Canada. But so any further clarity? Like he spelled out sort of philosophically the options that might exist and how tariffs could be purposed and applied. But, Inauguration Day is Monday. We're going to spend a lot of time together because we're going to expect to respond to news. Did he give any sign of what could happen on Inauguration Day or immediately after when it comes to all of these threats and executive orders?
Well, the Canadian government is still seeking to get some of that clarity. Melanie Joly is in Washington, D.C. right now. She had a series of meetings up on Capitol Hill, including with Senator Lindsey Graham. That's a name Canadians may know. Later today, she's apparently going to be meeting with Antony Blinken, the outgoing foreign secretary for the United States. But the message we heard from Melanie Joly, she did an interview with CNN. We tried to catch up with Canada's foreign minister up on Capitol Hill, but efforts were not, we tried.
They're focused on the U.S. audience today.
They're focused on the U.S. audience today, not on the Canadian audience, and we despite our efforts. So the message, she said, we're pleading for peace, tried to make the argument that this is actually going to hurt American consumers, which is something that isn't necessarily spoken about when, the Trump team talks about this. Remember, when tariffs are imposed, the business that imports the good has to pay that tariff. They give it to the Customs and Border Patrol. They give that money. What happens in some cases, that cost is passed along to the consumer, meaning that the average person does end up having to cover some of those costs. She argued that it's a Trump tariff tax, that kind of thing. One other thing that we heard from Bessent at his confirmation hearing today, he agrees with Donald Trump. He rejects the idea that this is going to hurt American consumers. And there was a couple of reasons he sort of leaned into when it came with China. But one thing he said, he thinks that it could sort of change consumption habits, that Americans look for more domestically produced products, as well as he thinks when it comes to China, that China will continue to lower their prices, even if there are these tariffs, because they want to maintain market access.
Okay. And Katie, two little bits of information. Apparently, Melanie Joly is meeting right now with James Risch, who is a Republican senator for Idaho, and met with Jeanne Shaheen, a Democratic senator from New Hampshire. This is what we have just been told. And she'll be doing a media callback tomorrow. All right, Katie, thank you so much. We appreciate it. This is CBC's Katie Simpson live in Washington. Well, here in Canada, British Columbia Premier David Eby made a declaration of economic war today, saying Canada is under a direct threat by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump.
In wartime, people need to come together and support each other, whatever it takes to ensure we get the attention of the Americans.
This unified response seems to be broken, with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith declining to sign a joint statement by the premiers over Canada's tariff response plan. Meanwhile, the private sector is pushing forward in their own Team Canada effort, and leading that is Goldy Hyder, President and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. Goldy, it's good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Are you happy with what you heard from the premiers and the Prime Minister yesterday? What did you make of the mostly united message that came out of it?
Well, look, I think it's important, first of all, that there was an actual face-to-face meeting in person with the Prime Minister and the premiers. I mean, this is unbelievable that it's happening on the eve of what is going to be a very, a serious situation on Monday. But I'm glad to see that happen. I'm glad to see that there's a general acknowledgement about both the issue of addressing the things that are being raised, legitimate issues, I would say, by the Americans on the question of the border, on the question of defense and security more broadly. That is a priority for them. It should be our priority as well. So I was happy to see that they went so far as to say we need to meet that NATO commitment for 2%, which again we've been saying for many years now, because it's the right thing to do, not just because you said you would do it. It's the right thing for Canada and Canadians to be people who keep their word. So we were happy to see that. I think there was also, and you had the piece there just a little earlier from some of the premiers talking about we got to get home base right as well. I kind of feel like we're in a situation where it's a home and away game, right? You got this away stuff. There's threats there. You're going to have to defend, and you're going to have to address them. But it's also an opportunity, and I know this is not a popular thing to say perhaps, but in some ways Donald Trump may have done Canada a favor. He has united us in many ways on the question of all the late night map posts, but more importantly, what he's saying is if you are a serious country, no serious country outsources its national security or its defense, or frankly allows itself to be put into a place where a single consumer is beholding your economy. So I think the fact that Premier Eby, who has come out and said we need to do a better job with permitting, we need to do a better job faster to get some of these things built. Many premiers we've been speaking to are acknowledging the need to bring down interprovincial trade barriers. So there's a chance here, David, to make sure that we don't allow this crisis to pass by and just simply go back to what was. We need to have a new approach to how we go forward to build our economy.
Well, look, Goldy, the premiers have been talking about bringing down interprovincial trade barriers since I had hair, and they've not really done much on it, right? Because it's easier for them to, it's something they have not made a priority. But
never waste a good crisis, David.
Well, but
we're going to be in one, unfortunately.
But maybe I wonder if maybe they are, because I wonder about the dissent by the Premier of Alberta yesterday, because it is adamant from other oil-producing provinces, Newfoundland and Labrador and Saskatchewan, you've got to leave everything on the table in this negotiation, because while the criticism of defense spending and other things may be legitimate, the tariff threat is pure bullying, and they need to be united to stand up against it. What does it do for Canada, and when they go to Washington and Danielle Smith is a total outlier and saying, don't you dare touch our oil in anything that you do?
Well, look, I will say with greatest respect to all of the premiers, they are operating in the interests of the fiduciary duty they have to the people that elected them in their province. So it's not unreasonable to believe, in particular in the case of Alberta. We have provinces suing our federal government. We've had a federal government that has effectively piled on the energy sector, on the energy industry at a time where the rest of the world, in particular the United States of America, wants more of our resources. A cap was put on on emissions at that time. We've not been able to move forward. And I know the federal government's defense will be, but we helped subsidize TMX and we got it built. Great. And yes, we're going to get LNG Canada off the ground. But the reality is this sector, the energy sector, has been effectively driving our economic growth. And if you're not going to use this moment from her position to say, hang on a minute here, I have some issues, and good for her for raising them, because that's what she's been elected to do.
But when you're dealing with an outside threat like Donald Trump, and one province and one industry. And look, my dad worked in the oil sector. I was raised on oil money. I'm not, anti that industry.
I think your province probably feels the same way.
Well, exactly. But Andrew Fury said, look, this is the queen in the chess game. You don't expose your queen early, but you have to be prepared to expose your queen if you're going to win the match. Danielle Smith is saying hands off, right? And so does that mean the agriculture sector, the auto sector, the manufacturing sector, all of these other sectors can be exposed, but not hers? It creates some internal and external challenges, does it not?
I think what's important here is we take a sort of a principles-based stand as we look at it as a country. How are we going to respond to this? The first thing is, I would say, do no harm. As much as possible, do no harm. Having said that, there probably will be harm. So now how do you minimize harm? Do you really want to drive inflation in Canada for Canadians? Do you really want to put our economy in life support, which some say it already is? Do you really want to be in a scenario where we're adding to our deficits by tens of billions of dollars because we're hurting Canadians so much? Do you really want to bring back inflation for Canadians? So we've got to get our own strategy in place, and I think we're facing the consequences, David, of effectively of what's taking place in Ottawa. I mean, we have not really been governed for a while, and I'm not sure how we're going to be governed for the next little while here. I understand another advisory committee has been put together, and it consists of, sort of the usual suspects to will. At least there's some CEOs on there. I'm grateful for that, because it's businesses is who trade agreements are made for, and we can help you with the tariffs. We can help you with the USMCA, because even that may be coming at us as early as Monday. Who knows? And that's the other thing, David, if I can just say to your viewers, there's a lot of anxiousness out there. There's a lot of hype and anxiety and a lot of discussions. My message is, let's keep calm. Let's ensure that we're getting ready for whatever the scenarios may be. We don't need to anticipate. We'll know in a matter of a few days here. Right. And always remember this, when Canadians go into the corner, they come back with the puck. So I'm pretty confident we'll be able to get through this. It's just a question of how long it will take. Look,
I like the hockey metaphor they're going around this day, but I also watched the World Juniors, and we didn't, right?
Well, let's be clear. The women found a way to win it.
Fair enough. But like the situation is that, you're right. Like we still don't know what's coming on Monday, if anything. We don't know when USMCA is going to come, though it's scheduled for review in 2026, and we don't know what the encore is for Trump, because he's not even in there yet, and look at where we are. So when you talk about the business community, like what are they bracing for on Monday? Like, where do things stand with your members?
Yeah, I think what's happening here is, as you just said, we don't know. We will all know together on Monday. There are a number of scenarios. There's a lot of analysis and a lot of homework being done, a lot of intelligence being gathered, all the way from, you might just get notification on Monday that says, look, I've tasked USTR to go out and analyze how poorly this previous administration, allowed the USMCA to get away from the deal that I had negotiated. What is the actual trade deficits with Canada and Mexico and other countries? Here's 60 days, 90 days. That could be a blessing for us to have some time to be able to deal with that. It could be the numbers much smaller and maybe manageable for the short term. It could be it's exactly what we're being told, all 25% on everything. I don't believe that it's going to be any of those things necessarily. Let's just wait and see what they're going to be, and we'll all know. But we have to make sure that we have those principles I spoke about, to not do harm to ourselves and to Canadians who are just coming out of the inflation that we've had. We've only just got it under control. Unemployment is fragile. The only reason I think it burst as much as it did last month is because the American economy is booming, and that's what Donald Trump wants. Invest in America. We need to make a case for investment to come to Canada.
Yeah, this is the calibration challenge the government has. How do you respond to what Trump does without compounding the damage on this side of the border?
Exactly.
Monday's going to be fascinating. May not be the right word, but it's the only one I have.
I'll be there live, David. I'll be there live.
All right, Goldy. That's Goldy Hyder, President and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. Thanks, sir. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is getting ready for the change that Donald Trump's presidency will bring, assembling a new council on Canada-U.S. relations made up of some heavy-hitter stakeholders from across political stripes. Some names include former Premiers Jean Charest, Rachel Notley, and Stephen McNeil. Former Canadian Ambassador to the U.S., David McNaughton, as well as Kirsten Hillman, Canada's current ambassador in Washington. With Trump promising executive orders and tariffs as of day one, Ontario Premier Doug Ford says Canada must be ready.
I think he's going to come out of the gate real quick. and start hitting us with tariffs. And he's going to try to, pay for his debt and everything else with it, but it's not working. It will not work.
Lana Payne is president of Unifor and one of the members of this new group. She joins me now. Lana Payne, it's good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, David. Good to see you.
It's one thing to pull a committee together. It's one thing for it to have an impact. What is the task and goal that you have been given by the Prime Minister in this role?
Well, David, there is a lot at stake right now, more than I've seen perhaps in my lifetime in terms of the threat that we're facing as a country, given the current plan of President-elect Trump to put tariffs on everything that we produce in Canada and sell to the United States. So for Canadians and particularly Canadian workers, this will be devastating, including a lot of people that I represent every single day. And I think the important thing of bringing together this kind of group is to say, we care about Canada, we care about Canadian workers and the economy, and we may differ on all kinds of things, but we're going to pull together because we needed a united front here in this country to deal with what's in front of us.
So you and the other members of this committee come from a broad spectrum of groups and interests that sometimes collide on domestic issues.
Oh, yes.
Yes. What did you make of what we saw with the premiers yesterday? Because that political alignment is something that was very important last time, is very important this time, and isn't quite there at the moment. What are your thoughts?
I think that this is extremely disappointing, and I think it undermines our position as a country when we can't get everybody on the same page. And honestly, in my world, in the union world, if you have a bargaining committee that isn't united, you're not going to get the kind of deal that you need. And that's what we saw yesterday. And my advice to all the premiers is that they really have to consider their position here. Most of them are on the same page, and we need to get everybody there. It's a lot at stake, and those who don't rise to the occasion will be judged by it. I can guarantee you that.
But Danielle Smith, with her objection to the united position, she is also going to be judged by Albertans and the people who work in their oil sector by how she conducts herself throughout this process, right? And she clearly feels her first duty is to Albertans, to make sure that their core sustaining industry isn't singled out or hurt by this because of the outsized role it plays in the economy. Can you understand that position, given what's at stake for the Premier of Alberta in a moment like this?
But every premier has that problem, David. All of them do, and she has other industries that are also trade exposed. What about them? So this is why it's important to have a coordinated strategy and not throw away anything that you would have in your hand, including a pair of aces, and expose a division to your opponent. So we're going to have to pull this back, and I think it's important that we have groups like this council that the Prime Minister has appointed, but there are others out there too. There are a lot of smart Canadians who want to solve this problem. What's going to be key is truly figuring out what it is that the president wants from Canada, because I don't believe that's clear right now. And are the demands going to grow? And that's why it's very difficult if we get into a position where we're trying to appease him as individuals rather than working together as a country with a common approach.
Yeah, because there's what he does on Monday and there's what he does for an encore, because we know there's going to be an encore, right? Because we've already gone through 4 years of this, right? So look, yes. You're working with the political groups and the other business groups, but I know, your union represents some auto workers. You talk to people, in the U.S. On this, your brothers and sisters in America, they probably don't want these tariffs as much as they like manufacturing jobs inside U.S. borders. What are you hearing from your counterparts in America on this?
Yeah, I think everybody in the US right now is on a bit of a tenterhook because they don't really know what's going to happen. And you have to realize their lives are going to be impacted by a number of other things, trade being one of them. And I have to say, some of our sectors are so interconnected we supply a lot. We build things together. That's the reality. Canada and the United States and Mexico. And once you, if you hurt Canada and Canadian workers, American workers will feel the impact of that too, because these sectors are so connected. But they're also going to be facing an onslaught of other things. This president is looking at putting in place 100 executive orders on day one. So there's going to be, and there a lot for them to have to digest very quickly. And this is a president, as we all know from his first term, that likes chaos and likes to disrupt. And that is a strategy in and of itself.
So you're going to be there on day one, right? You're going to Washington for the inauguration. Am I understanding that correctly? I mean, what are you hoping? I don't presume you're going to get to see Donald Trump so you can make this argument to him to his face, but who do you hope to see down there that you can make this pitch to?
Yeah, absolutely. I've invited to go to the U.S. or the Canadian embassy in Washington, and I felt honored to do that. There's no other place that I would want to be to talk to who else is going to be gathered there that day, and to make sure that the voices of workers and the fact that their jobs are at risk is expressed to everybody that needs to hear that. This is the biggest threat that the Canadian economy has faced in a very, very long time, and it's my job and my responsibility to stand up for workers, and that's what I'm going to do, no matter where it is that I have to do it.
Well, Lana Payne, hopefully you don't have to stand up too much for too long, and this is just noise and not an actual threat, because the economy doesn't need it and the country doesn't need it. But that's Lana Payne, president of Unifor. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, David.